Hi there, my name is Martin Stone from Switch On Health, and welcome to tonight's presentation, which is titled Other Pathways Less Travelled. Now, if you're watching this live, thank you so much for turning up and showing your support for Switch On Health. Please do stick around until the end because we do have a fantastic special offer from Christopher, as well as our lucky door prize for one attendee to win a voucher to put towards studies with their further studies with Switch On Health. Now, if you're watching this recording on YouTube, please, you are welcome to put any comments or questions you've got into that box below, and we promise we will get back to you. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, please do just click on that subscribe button because the more subscribers we have, the more we can offer, and we look forward to offering you more. Now, if you're watching this live, any questions, just put them into the chat box. We'll have a chat at the end. Our presenter for tonight is Christopher Smith from Tinderry Herbs. Now, some of us had the pleasure of watching Christopher present at the Estuary Learning Conference earlier this year, and I got to say, he was so good. We thought we have got to get this guy presenting for Switch On Health. So that's enough for me. Christopher, thank you so much for coming tonight, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Martin, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming along. So here we are, herbal medicine, other pathways left less traveled. And Martin and Carmen invited me to come and talk to you about different options other than the clinical path, and not putting the clinical path down at all. It's a great avenue to pursue, but it's not everyone's cup of tea. So I'm going to share with you my journey with herbs, natural medicine, and other things, just to show it's not a straight line. There's all sorts of twists and turns, and that there's a whole range of things you can do other than the clinical side. So let's hop in here. So, this great question. You've become qualified, now what? And in the photo down here, that question starts popping up before your mortarboard hits the ground after throwing it in the air. And there's a great quote here from Robert Frost that I think captures this. He says, "Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference." So we're going to go down that less travelled road this evening. Another quote here, a fellow called Rico Keck, who is a herbalist. He lives in Oregon, United States. He is one of the best medicinal herb growers around, and his books and references are legendary. And his interesting quote, "As for the way of herbalism, my experience is that discovering what the plants are good for is mighty useful. But how much better is it still when they teach me what I am good for?" So that's a good one to ponder. So we're going to start way back in the beginning on my journey in the 70s. So you can see the picture on the right. There I am with my brother and my dad visiting. Here's my dad, here's my brother, Auntie Kath, Uncle Jack, who were growing plants. And I came home that day with a collection of motley jam tins and bits and pieces of plants for me to grow. And if you can find me in the photograph, I'm just there. I'm actually sitting on a short stool. I wasn't that small then. So I brought these plants home and they stood on the tank stand at home because I didn't have anywhere to put them. And then it's like, well, you've got plants, you need a brush house, you've got to make your own shade house. So we were living in Robe, southeast South Australia. So we had plenty of scrub around, plenty of bush. I got the axe and I went out in the bush and I started cutting poles and I started cutting brush. And we had a book that was highly revered in the household. It was about gardening. I think it was The Home Gardener by Noel Lothian, who was the Adelaide Botanic Gardens director. And it was almost like the holy book in the house. And it had a whole section about how to make a shade house. So I took inspiration from that, dragged in bits and pieces of brush. That's a photo I found the actual photo of my brush house is buried somewhere in my family archives. But it was basically an axe, a shovel, wire from the newsagent, and brush. And I made a shade house, and I started growing and killing plants. I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. I didn't know anything about potting mix, fertilizer. I just knew I liked plants, and some grew and some didn't. I was fascinated with ferns, so I'd go every time we went to Millicent. I would buy a fern out of my pocket money and bring it home and proceed to kill it slowly. Um, as an orchid grower said to me once, he says, if in terms of like marking the progress, if you're growing with plants, if you're not killing them, you're not trying hard enough. And what he meant by that is you're extending your capabilities and your realm of knowledge. So growing plants, uh, year 12 at school, my ambition was to be a trainee gardener at the Adelaide Botanic Gardens. That was it. I had no other aim. Went and did an interview with Dr. Morley, who was the director then. And I was in year 11 then. And, you go to his office for the interview, and he's pretty cunning. He knew the questions to ask me because I'd filled out a form and I was interested in ferns. So he starts to ask me these really searching questions about the life cycle of ferns, sporangia and antheridium, and I managed to put up a respectable show because I'd had a pretty technical fern book which I'd devoured. And he said, "Go back, do year 12, and then we'll fit you in," basically. So I did year 12, sent the results off. The invitation came, and I spent 3 years at the Adelaide Botanic Garden learning horticulture. So with uh, lectures at the TAFE and then the rest of the time at the gardens where you could earn a wage. So it was 100% total immersion in the plant world, and it was fantastic. And you can see here the photograph of the Botanic Garden. This is just off North Terrace. The riotous profusion of plants that were in there, and everything had a label, and all the gardeners and everyone in there were complete plant tragics. So it was a really good start. A bit of a jolt for a very naive young country boy to be in the city, but we survived. So qualified there, and then I worked in amenity horticulture in New South Wales, Mitchell College. It's now Charles Sturt University. Worked on Blaney Shire Council. Then life change. I actually got sick of horticulture because I found I couldn't earn enough money. Um, I had friends who spent more on stock food in 1 year than I earned in 1 year. So that was, it just was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Not that I didn't like plants, but economically it wasn't the best paid of professions. So I worked for organisations for a while, but then I had my horticultural business for a while, and this is one of the gardens I looked after, Athol Gardens in Blaney, wealthy Sydney solicitor, partner at a legal firm, Blake Dawson Waldron. He owned this rural property and spent enormous amounts of money on it. That was really good. That was a treasure. And he would come up to this garden, oh God, every 4 or 5 weeks for a weekend. So I'd be maintaining the place and mowing the lawn and doing this and that. And I'm thinking, What's going on here? Like, no one comes and sees the garden." But then I was talking to someone in town, and their commute brought them past the garden every day. And they said to me, "Oh, I look at that garden every day I come past and it's just great." And I thought, wow, you never know what the impact is of the things that you do. You think no one's looking or no one's appreciating, but there are people. Now, I had my horticultural business for a while, and then I just still wasn't quite earning enough, and I was just not happy. And my friend, Michael Tams, who's sitting here in the front row with the bald head, he was in Canberra and he said, "Oh, why don't you just come down to Canberra and we'll share house?" So I sold my house, packed everything up, moved to Canberra just to get open up to sort of new opportunity. And Michael was doing courses at the Hierophant, and that's what is depicted here. This is their old premises, um, where they had books and the whole thing, everything fitted in. And you can see the amazing Kim Dudley to the right, unfortunately deceased now, but he was one of the co-founders along with Tim Thomas of the Hierophant. An amazing guy, skilled in homeopathy, herbalism, acupuncture. Plus, he was an ardent Siddha yoga practitioner and a very deep delver into remedies. And Kim and Tim did courses at the Hierophant. So I started doing, what was it? Homeopathic first aid. I did that because Michael had done it. He said, "Oh, it's a great course. Do that." Um, and so I did that. And then I started doing Tim Thomas's homeopathy. And I was just saying to Martin earlier, I did a year and a half, and then I sunk beneath the waves and the weight of the materia medica. I just couldn't make sense of it all. And what looks blindingly obvious now that I'm a horticulturalist and a herbalist, and I work on the intersection of that, it didn't, I'm still trying to find that intersection. So, what I'm trying to say with that is do all these little courses and things, expose yourself to a whole range of influencers and practitioners and teachers, and you never know how it all sort of melds together. But Tim and Kim, their courses were pretty magical because they're just the materia medica, the depth they did on remedies, be it plant or homeopathy, was incredible. And they blended it together as well. Like in one lecture, it would swap a bit from a homeopathic remedy to an insight on a herb, and then there might be a mention of a bark flower, and on it went, or an essential oil. So you got a sense of the natural medicine world without so much of the dividers that sometimes go up. And I know we have separate courses for homeopathy and herbs, and that's perfectly fine. But these guys really saw a broad view, and that was very instrumental in my take on everything. So yeah, I sunk beneath the waves after a year and a half of homeopathic study, and then along came Matthew Wood's book, the Book of Herbal Wisdom. So I was still hanging around, and I bought this book and I read it. And there's a chapter a herb, and it goes pretty in depth. And there's some kind of magic in this book because it really inspired me. There were a couple of remedies in there. I thought there was Solomon seal, teasel, and sweet leaf, and we've got a photo on the next slide. I really got fired up about these remedies. I thought, oh, these are amazing. Where do you get them? And of course, knowing the Hierophant, I went straight there and asked them, have you got these? Have you got teasel? Have you got sweet leaf? Have you got Solomon seal? And they said, no. And I thought, what? That was staggering to me. I thought they just had every remedy. But it turned out that no one was making those remedies in Australia. And this was a real pivotal point for me because that's when the horticultural brain kicked in. And it's like, well, I know Solomon seal. I think I had a plant in my garden when I was in Blaney. Well, I could get Solomon seal and I could grow it. And at the back of the chapter of Solomon seal in Matthew Wood's book was these very simple, direct instructions how to make a tincture. Basically, get a jar, put some washed chopped root in there, and add vodka. He didn't get into ratios and alcohol percentages. It was very, very simple. And it turned out to be perfect because you didn't get tripped up by complicated ratios, calculations, thinking you haven't got the right equipment. It was a very empowering instruction. So off I go to find Solomon seal, and I bought some, and then I madly propagated it. It took several years because it can be a slow grower. And you can see here my famous bathtubs. I had 20 bathtubs of Solomon seal, and this is the picture of them at its glory. This is in spring. You can see it flowering. It's just magnificent. And I just started making tincture really simply from the Solomon seal, and the Hierophant bought some from me. And that's how I started, just making some of these boutique tinctures, but also getting connected with the plants through the medicinal herbs through growing them. So it took quite a while for the penny to drop that my particular part of the natural medicine world is growing the medicinal herbs, and not the everyday ones, not to put them down by any means, but the offbeat, quirky, unusual, endangered, the ones no one's ever heard of, or that live in an obscure book. So it was just like a Sherlock Holmes story for me. I loved Sherlock Holmes when I was a kid. It's a detective story. And thank God for the internet. So I'm Googling and looking and talking to people, and I found seed. So we've got sweet leaf here on the far left. Okay. Found some seed of sweet leaf, grew that, made tincture. Heard about golden seal. I got a few plants off Tony Hoseman down in Victoria, and I also got some from Island Herbs in Tasmania. Unfortunately, no longer in business. And I got in touch with Island Herbs because I wanted teasel and I couldn't find it anywhere. And I was talking to the lady and she said, "Oh, it's pretty easy grower. It's almost a weed." Said, "I'll send you some seedlings up, but be warned." So I started growing teasel, and we've got a polytunnel here, 10-meter polytunnel. So I had it in the polytunnel. I had it in these 8-inch pots, loving it up, plenty of water and food. And what was a little seedling became a 6-foot spiny monster. It was glorious. And it got a nickname, the Triffid, because it's got all these spines on it. And every time we went past, it took a piece of flesh with it. And then it seeded and off it went. And now it's basically, I don't have to, what do you concentrate on growing it because it's just everywhere. So that's the sort of plant adventures I went on, looking for plants, looking for where these plants were, who had them, who grew them, and it was great. But then there was I'm growing all these plants, and a lady who was a CEO of a local healthcare college, Shanti, said to me, "Oh, look, you're growing all these plants. Why don't you jump in our course and become qualified? It'll give you a lot of advantages." And I thought, oh, yeah, okay. It sort of establishes me in that world. I felt like I was an enthusiastic amateur and that I was around the edges, but when really I was in the thick of it. So I did the herbal medicine course, and that was good because it systematized my knowledge and put it all together rather than bits here and bits there. It put it into a context, and that was great. And I did clinical work for a while. I enjoyed it, but it really wasn't my thing. And I was doing it because it was there, not because it was necessarily my passion or the best intersection of all my skills. So I got really deep into growing the herbs, and I ended up with about 130 different species. And that doesn't sound a lot, but you try watering them, potting them, propagating them, keeping an eye on them. It's quite a handful. And at its peak here, Matthew Wood came out to for a lecture series at the Hierophant, and he came out to visit our garden because he said to them, "Well, where's the herb garden around here?" And they said, "Oh, no, we haven't got a herb garden." "Oh, Christopher grows herbs," so he headed out, and we had a wonderful day. So you can see there, myself, Matthew. You've got Sondra Prettyfeather. she's a Cherokee herbalist. Anne, my partner at the time, Pam, Jerry, Prakash, who are all students of the all qualified herbalist students of the Hierophant. Um, and then later on in the later year, he came out and did well, you could call it a herb walk or a herb talk in person, where, there was a whole range of remedies, and then he went through talking about them. So you can see what happens when you start down this road, and I call it following the breadcrumb trail. And everyone's breadcrumb trail is going to be different. And it's all these little things that if you take notice of them, it makes a difference. Like reading Matthew Wood's book and getting excited about the herbs and deciding to grow them. And then when I'd grown a few, I was actually at the Hierophant, and the lady there, Reve Hodges, sadly now passed, she said, well, why don't we come out to your place and do a herb walk, And she said, I'd pay money. And I'm thinking, oh, look, it's going to take another 3 years. I was building this amazingly complicated process and structure. She said, no, 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 let's do it now. Look, we'll set the price, $50, and then we'll put it out in an email and see what happens. Well, lo and behold, a dozen people turn up. And I had notes talking about the plants and showing them to people. We had several plant walks. We'd cover between 30 and 40 plants in a day. Once again, that doesn't sound a lot, but you would go home with your head reeling after that. And of course, we would have morning tea, afternoon tea, lunch, and of course, being good herbalists, we like to talk. So lunch is not 30 minutes, it's an hour. Anne made good tea and coffee, cooked scones, cakes, and everything. And it was great. People had a very good time. In fact, I was talking to Pam last night, this lady here, and she said, oh, that's some of my best memories having gone on that herb walk, seeing the plants. So, they were really simple. The plants were there in pots and bathtubs and in the garden, and we walked around and we looked at them. And it was a point of continual amazement to me that these people who had been using these plants in the clinic had not seen the plant in person. So, sometimes we don't see the full amount of our skills and abilities. It just seems like wallpaper to us, but to other people, it's something really special. So, as I mentioned, we did the herb walks on the farm here. They're just stock photos. And I did, what else did I do? I did workshops. So we did making tincture workshops up here. And we did workshops where we had students from the local herbal medicine college come out. And here we are, everyone's on the Land Cruiser. We're going to go out in the paddock and we're going to cut down a blackberry and we're going to make blackberry root tincture. So we just really had great fun, and it was simple and people really appreciated it. I got really fancy and actually had a making homeopathics course. So this is in the house, couple of tables set up, and the all the gear. So what I'm trying to say is you can do this at a very simple level. You don't need to have a specialist building or whatever. You do it with what you've got. Tincture making. So you've got Solomon seal here, violet leaf, more Solomon seal. I really got into the tincture making, and I had a custom press made at the local metal manufacturing. So 5 ton press, and that's amazing. So you're in deep when you start getting things like that made, and custom made stainless steel pans for pressing. And I was very fortunate to go down and do a course at the Tinderry Herb Farm just out of Launceston in Tasmania. Unfortunately, no longer running. Ken Atherton, gentleman in the middle there, he's passed away. He was a pharmacist and he had a little farm and he grew herbs and he made tinctures and he did this and had courses. And I went down there and it's like, wow, this is like being home. Only he's, writ large. You had accommodation on site. It really was a great setup. And people still rave about it. But that was very formative. And I guess the point with this is these little courses that people run. I know you're doing your main qualification, and that's really important. Don't rule yourself out from doing these other little quirky courses. I learned how to make natural skincare products from Ken. He shared all the formulas and processes and whatever, and that's just a little side business I have. And like just a little bit of a summary of my journey. And I'm just saying this so that you can see, as I mentioned before, it's not a straight line, it's zigzag. And you'll go through multiple phases of doing things until all the bits start to join together. So, growing plants as a teenager, working at the Botanic Garden, got my certificate in advanced amenity horticulture, and then, was interested in food plants and permaculture. Did an applied science degree environment because I thought I wanted to go down that path, but I could never find sort of employment in that aspect, permanent employment. Worked for the Commonwealth government for a while, then got interested in herbs, did those courses, started growing the herbs, running workshops on the farm, doing the herbal medicine studies, natural skincare products, and then currently my main effort is Herbology Hub, which is an online membership program for people who like herbs and want to grow herbs. And we'll cover that in a slide in a tick, because I've got a special offer for you if you want to jump on board. So, yeah, the lesson here is it's always going to be a zigzag and a loop around. And there were many years where I just didn't know what I wanted to do with this knowledge. Was it a hobby? Was I going to make it a business? Where was it going to go? Do I want to study to be a professional herbalist? It all looks pretty easy or straightforward or obvious with hindsight, but when you're in the middle of it, it can be really quite confusing. And what I would also say is there is no such thing as wasted experience, regardless of what profession you've been in or job you do. Um, I mean, here's just a list of things you can do other than, clinical practice. So you can grow herbs for local markets or grow them for other herbalists. You could be a grower and supplier of dried herbs, and that could be quite an attractive niche. You could be a herbal tea blender. Uh, I'm a conservation herbalist, which means I'm focusing a lot on endangered plants and putting together how we can grow them and propagate them and get the skills and the knowledge together. You can make herbal creams and potions and lotions. You could do community clinic work. You could do the herb walks, and you don't necessarily even have to grow the herbs. Even if you took people through a walk through a spare paddock, there's going to be bound to be heaps of plants there that we all look down on as weeds, but actually are profound medicinal herbs. You can be a herbal educator. You can connect your herbal knowledge with sort of different community organisations. There's the herbs and food angle. I was talking to a lady the other day. She was tossing up whether she was going to do studies or not, and she'd actually allied herself with a local herbalist and done her courses. And she had a large family and she had a big garden. And I said, you could run herb walks in your garden, just have people come around and interact with the herbs. Or another really, really good angle is you could be a medicinal herb grower for key herbs, as in we need more than one person doing this. We need a whole range of people doing this to spread the risk. If someone's garden suffers a catastrophe, we don't want, the only stock of herb X there to be destroyed or misplaced or whatever. So there's a range of options, and really use your imagination, and you can still put that knowledge you're learning at the moment to very good use. Um, here's a few tips anyway. The illustration, of course, is from the old fairy tale Hansel and Gretel with their breadcrumb trail. Now they're going forward with it, but I always think of the breadcrumb trail as you're finding these little breadcrumbs. They're like little clues or little points of where you see something and you think, oh, what about that? Do that course, talk to that person. I mean, what I would say to you first is finish your course of study. And that is not a paid advertisement from Switch On Health, because I've seen when I did horticulture, when I did science, when I did herbalism qualifications, perfectly competent people drop out of the course. And I've got to say to you, there are no medals for a half completed course. And yeah, it can get tough and your motivation can flag and life gets in the way. You move house, change partner, have kids, whatever, change cars, your financial fortunes go up and down. Stay the course, finish it. And also, it's as much about the people you meet as the knowledge. Um, it's really important that that social connection. You can read books all you like, but it's out with the people where things really happen and where you learn, you get connections and opportunities. Strongly encourage you to get a mentor. Just find someone that seems to resonate with you and start hanging out with them. Shout them coffee or a meal or whatever, or just say to them, hey, can I just hang around and learn from you or whatever? I know we're all internet connected and Starlink connected and digital this and that and webinars. A physical library is still an enormous resource. And you can see behind me, here's a physical library. It's so important. There's a lot of stuff in books that you maybe not find on the internet. Read widely and consistently. And if you wanted to get specific about that, I did hear a person saying if you wanted to be an expert in a field, read 1 hour a day for a year in that field, and you'll go, a fair bit and be able to be very functional in that area, apart from brain surgery, of course. Go to herbal gatherings. There's some really good ones around. There's a herbalist collective in Canberra that's focused at the H dispensary. The H dispensary used to be the Hierophant. You've also got Estuary Learning, whose annual conferences are absolutely brilliant. You'll meet a huge range of people there. Um, and it's important that people don't care about what you know. It's about what can the knowledge do for them. So you've got to make it functional. Oh, do I have a favorite herbal book? I'll come back to that. Um, Look for the breadcrumbs. So those little clues, those little random, seemingly bits of chance or synchronicity, they're really important. And I think you might have seen several in what I've talked about my journey through into towards natural medicine, towards doing what my particular gift is. And I'm still following breadcrumbs. And really important, lighten up on yourself. There's no such thing as the right way. Okay. What looks to be like a dead end or you think it's a waste of time, it never is. And one really important skill is become if you want to get off the beaten track and do different things with herbs, being good at public speaking, getting up in front of people and talking about an area of knowledge you know is gold. Absolutely gold. I can't emphasize this enough. Talk about what you know, which gives you confidence. Start small and build up from there. And this is like, so you can see the three rings. You've got science studies, herbal medicine, horticulture, and that's like my special gift. And you can see in the middle is where it all intersects. And that's where your great gift to the world lies. So everyone's going to have different circles and different names on the circles, but it might be a handy exercise just to draw that out for yourself and see what is in the middle. Um, it's very powerful because it's so important you do your own unique thing, and you've all got a special gift to give into the natural medicine community and to life and the people around you. And it takes a long time sometimes to find that, but it's always worth it. Now, Herbology Hub. So this is my online membership program for people who like medicinal herbs. They want to grow medicinal herbs. They want to improve their growing skills. So normally it's 47.90 plus GST a month, but tonight I'm going to give you a special offer of 50% off. So what do you get when you join the group? So you have a monthly webinar, which is a deep dive on a specific topic. So today we actually had Tim Thomas talking about first aid remedies, homeopathic. Previous month we did plant propagation. Before that we did two webinars on yarrow, a really deep dive into yarrow, and we've done nettle and Solomon seal and golden seal. These deep dive sessions, they're recorded, and there's a back library which when you join up as a member you get access to, and there's over 2 years of recordings. We've also got a private Facebook group where you can post and ask questions and do things. And every month there's an hour where you can ask me any question you like. And you can see there lower left, that's the Herbology Hub Nerve Centre setup. And this is some of the topics we've covered. You know, we've done yarrow, nettle, Solomon seal, golden seal, arnica, how to make your own apothecary garden, plant propagation, specialist seed sowing. We did a great one on Australian soils earlier this month, and we're going to do some more getting into organic matter and how to enliven soils, uncommon herbs. So there's a whole range of topics. And the key thing is, if you're a member, you can actually say, hey, why don't we do a topic on X? And I'll do that because the plant propagation was by request, and so was the Australian soils one. Now we have a range of guests, and I keep inviting more people along. So I've talked about Tim Thomas. We've also had Irene Hess Oates, who's a great naturopath and author and really good on nutrition. And we've had Phil Snare as well. Now, to take advantage of that, head over to the website tinderrymountainherbs.com.au, click on the tab Herbology Hub, and click on the sign up buttons. And when you're going through the process, put in the discount code Tinderry50. It's there up the top. You get 50% off for 3 months. And here's a little bit of self-serving promotion. Yvonne Best, well, she's actually a member now. She's been to one of my tours at the Tinderry. She did one of the herb tours, and as you can see, one of the best experiences, a pioneer and honest knowledge broker. She hopes to visit again. She's in New Zealand, so unfortunately that didn't happen. Luciana Todd, who trained me in speaking and talking, and Diane, who came out to see what we were doing on the farm. So there we go. Now, Martin, shall we open it up for questions?
Oh, look, I think that's a fantastic idea, Christopher. I'll stop the recording in a moment, but look, before I do, I just wanted to say, you know, it was awesome hearing you speak, and yeah, I think it really kind of opens people's eyes to what are the other possibilities out there. We do sometimes get asked a bit from people who are thinking about studying with us, what are the job opportunities I like? And of course, practice is the obvious one,
Mm,
but there
mm.
are many, many others. For me, it became education, for example. Um, and look, it's funny that you said, you kind of got a bit I can't remember the expression you used, like going underneath the waves with homeopathy.
Oh,
You know?
sunk beneath the waves. Yeah, yeah. There was
Yeah.
bubbles coming up. Yeah.
You see, I was thinking that there's this concept in homeopathy that a lot of us will be familiar of, which is PQRS, peculiar, queer, rare, and strange.
Mm.
And your niche turned into growing medicinal herbs, but it wasn't just that; it was PQRS herbs. What are the peculiar, queer, rare, strange herbs that nobody else is growing? And that really
Oh,
became
nice
important.
connection.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I don't know how many people are horticulturists or deep in the plant world. You're at least on the edge of it. Um, when you get into horticulture, I mean, get into it, like it's an obsessive love affair. When I was at the Botanic Gardens, there was a phrase, it was called married to horticulture. That's how much it can take over. Yeah. And you get very passionate about the plants. And I'm sure as herbalists and naturopaths and homeopaths, you get very passionate. You might have a couple of remedies that you really resonate with that work for you. You understand them at a very deep level. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, look, I love how earthy this is as well, Christopher. I think, there's a lot of people who are studying herbal medicine or interested in herbal medicine and all other natural remedies. A lot of people live in the cities, and we can become quite removed from, I guess, the roots, so to speak, of where our remedies are coming from. For a lot of herbalists, the medicines are coming in brown bottles or in packets and tablet form and so on, and it's so far removed from you know the earth. Where do our plants actually come from? And you've managed to basically combine that, because you're growing herbs, and of course you're also offering this online facilitation to people via your Herbology Hub. It's really good to see.
Yeah, I'm a very earthy person, sun, moon, and rising sign in earth signs. But I spent a lot of time in the country, a lot of my childhood and a lot of my adulthood, and it gives you a very practical slant on things. But I've lived with plants and soil and whatever, and it always amazes me that someone hasn't seen a plant. Um, and it's a really important thing to connect herbalists and homeopaths to the actual items of their materia medica to get beyond. Okay, yeah, there's all this stuff in books and there's pictures in books and there's stuff online, but really get to see the plant and touch it and grow it. You might not do all of them, but maybe you can go on someone's herb tour or whatever. It makes a huge difference. The relationship deepens. Yeah,
Yeah, I can really imagine. Okay, so one last question from me before I switch off the recording, and we'll open it up to questions from everybody
no
else.
worries.
So, uh, if someone was interested in perhaps going down a similar path to you, growing their own medicinal herbs, what would you say to them?
Just get started. Start easy. Just grow calendula. You don't have to have a horticultural certificate or degree or whatever. Just get your hands dirty. Um, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Like that advice I got from the orchid grower. If you're not killing enough, you're not killing your plants, you're not trying hard enough. You don't want to deliberately kill your plants, of course, but in terms of just having a go at stuff, start with calendula, and work out from there. But also look out for ones that you feel a connection with. Um, Look, a lot of the specialist plants, um, I would read of them and I'd reread them and reread. It'd get really intense, and I'd be looking at all these different references. I would get obsessed about the plant until I got some propagating material and I grew it. And I would say, if you find that happening, just follow the breadcrumbs, but just grow plants and you can do them in pots. You find a bit of ground somewhere, get a community garden plot, whatever. There's lots of opportunities. Just grow them and see where it goes.
And sign up for your Herbology Hub.
Oh, absolutely. And do every possible course at Switched On Health. Right. Is that right, Martin?
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you, Christopher. So, look, I'll switch off the recording now. If you're watching the recording, thank you so much for watching until the end. If you're here live with us, please do stick around because I know that Christopher and Deanne and myself would all love to have a chat with you. Thank you once again and learn more with Switch on Health.